The garage had been locked for years. No one in the family really talked about it. It sat behind the old house like a forgotten memory, its paint peeling and its windows covered in dust. Even the wind seemed to avoid it. After their grandfather passed away, the house felt emptier than anyone expected. Not just quiet, but heavy, like something had been left unsaid. 3 grandchildren stood in the backyard that afternoon. Ayan, the oldest, held the rusted key, Mira across her arms, unsure if this was a good idea. And little Zane just stared at the garage, curious and restless. Are we really doing this? Mira asked softly. Ayan nodded. He would have wanted us to. But the truth was, none of them knew what their grandfather would have wanted, because in his final years, he had become distant, quiet, almost like a stranger. The garage door creaked the moment the key turned. A long, aching sound, as if it hadn't been opened in decades. Dust fell from the edges as Ayan pushed it up. Sunlight slowly crept inside, revealing shadows frozen in time. The air smelled old, like wood, metal, and something faintly familiar. Zane stepped in first. Whoa! Inside, everything was exactly where it had been left. Tools hung neatly on the wall. Boxes were stacked carefully. Nothing looked chaotic. In fact, it looked organized. Too organized. Mira frowned. This doesn't look abandoned. Ayan didn't respond. He was staring at something in the corner. A workbench. Clean. Perfectly arranged. Like someone had been using it recently. But that didn't make sense. Their grandfather hadn't touched this place in years. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. Zane wandered deeper inside. His footsteps echoed softly. Hey, what's this? He pointed to a covered object in the middle of the garage. A large shape under a faded cloth. Mira hesitated. I don't like this. But Ayan walked forward anyway. Slowly, carefully, he grabbed the edge of the cloth and pulled. Dust exploded into the air, revealing something none of them expected. It was a motorcycle, but not just any motorcycle. It was polished, shiny, beautiful, like it had been taken care of recently. Mira stepped closer. Grandpa didn't ride motorcycles. Ayan shook his head. No, he didn't. Zane leaned in, eyes wide. It's brand new. But it wasn't brand new. There were scratches, tiny marks, signs of use. Someone had been riding it. The 3 of them stood in silence, a strange feeling creeping in, like they were discovering a side of their grandfather they never knew existed. Mira whispered, "Why would he keep this a secret?" Ayan didn't answer, because he was looking at something else. Attached to the handlebar, a small tag with a date written on it. A recent date, just a few months before their grandfather passed away. That's impossible, Ayan murmured. Zane frowned. What? Ayan swallowed. He was in the hospital then. The air inside the garage suddenly felt colder. Mira took a step back. This isn't right. But curiosity was stronger than fear. Ayan turned toward the shelves. There were notebooks, stacks of them, each one labeled with dates. Carefully, neatly, like records. Zane grabbed one. Can I open it? Ayan hesitated, then nodded. Zane flipped it open, and his expression changed instantly. What is it? Mira asked. Zane didn't speak. He just handed it to her. Mira read the first line, and her eyes filled with tears. It's about us. Ayan stepped closer. What do you mean? Myra's voice trembled. These are notes. About every time we visited him. Ayan grabbed the notebook, flipping through pages. Each entry was detailed, painfully detailed. What they wore, what they said, what made them laugh, even the things they didn't notice themselves. It wasn't just memory. It was observation. Deep, emotional, like he had been holding on to every moment. Zane whispered, Why would he write all this? No one had an answer. Mira wiped her tears. I thought he stopped caring. Ayan clenched the notebook tighter. But something didn't add up. If their grandfather cared this much, why did he push everyone away? Why did he become so distant? Ayan turned to the next page and froze, because this entry was different. It wasn't about the past. It was about the future. A plan, a detailed plan, for something he never told anyone about. Mira leaned closer. What does it say? Ion read slowly. He was building something. Zane tilted his head. Building what? Ion looked around the garage again, at the tools, at the motorcycle, at the notebooks, and then back at the page. His voice dropped. I think this garage wasn't abandoned. Myra's heart started racing. Then what was it? Ion looked at both of them and said, quietly, it was a secret life. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, because now the garage wasn't just a place. It was a mystery, and they had only just opened the door. The words didn't leave Ion's mind. A secret life. They echoed in the silence of the garage. Mira slowly sat down on a wooden stool nearby. I don't understand, she whispered. Zane looked around again, this time more carefully, not with curiosity, but with wonder. Like every object in the garage meant something deeper now. Ion flipped another page, and another. Each entry felt more personal than the last. Not just memories, feelings, regrets, hopes, things their grandfather had never said out loud. Listen to this, Ion said quietly. He read. Mira smiled today, but I could tell she was tired. I wish I had asked her what was wrong. I always run out of time to say the right things. Mira covered her mouth. Tears slipped through her fingers. I thought he didn't even notice me. Zane moved closer to her. He noticed everything. Ion kept reading. Ion pretends to be strong. He carries more than he should. I see it in his eyes, even when he laughs. Ion stopped. His throat tightened. For a moment, he couldn't speak. No one had ever said that to him before, not even his parents. And yet, their grandfather had seen it, without a word. Zane reached for another notebook. Smaller, older. He opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was slightly shakier, like it had been written during harder days. Hey, this one is different, Zane said. Ion looked up. How? Zane pointed to the first page. There are drawings. Mira leaned in. Simple sketches. Not perfect, but meaningful. A small house. 3 stick figures. And one taller figure standing behind them, watching. Not joining, just watching. Myra's voice trembled. That's us. Ion nodded slowly. And that's him. Zane frowned. Why is he standing so far away? No one answered, because deep down, they already knew. Ion turned back to the main notebook. His hands moved faster now, almost urgently, like he was searching for something. Then suddenly, he stopped. A page marked with a red line, different from all the others. This must be important, he said. Mira stood up. What does it say? Ion took a breath and began reading. The doctor says I don't have much time. I've made too many mistakes to fix everything, but maybe I can leave something behind. Myra's heart sank. Zane looked confused. Mistakes? Ion continued. They think I became distant because I stopped caring. The truth is, I started caring too much, and I didn't know how to show it anymore. Mira shook her head, tears falling freely now. That's not fair, Zane whispered. Why didn't you just tell us? Ion didn't respond, because the next line answered everything. I was afraid they would see how broken I really was. Silence filled the garage again. Heavy, painful, real. Mira sat back down. I wish we knew. Ion closed the notebook slowly. But we're knowing now. Zane looked around again. His eyes landed on something new. A wooden cabinet in the corner. It was slightly open. Hey, there's more stuff here. Ion walked over, pulled the door open wider. Inside were carefully placed boxes, each labeled with names. Mira gasped. They're ours. Ion read the labels. Mira. Zane. Ion. 3 boxes, one for each of them. Zane's eyes lit up. Can we open them? Mira hesitated, but Ion nodded. I think he wanted us to. Zane grabbed his box first, opened it quickly. Inside were small items. A toy car, a broken watch, a drawing. Things that seemed ordinary, but weren't. These are my things, Zane said softly. I lost him years ago. Mira opened hers, her hands trembling. Inside was a scarf, an old notebook, and a photograph. She picked it up, her younger self, standing next to their grandfather, both of them smiling. I thought he didn't keep any pictures, she whispered. Ion opened his last. Inside was a letter, folded carefully, with his name written on it. He stared at it for a long moment, then slowly opened it. His eyes scanned the first few lines, and instantly filled with tears. Mira stepped closer. What does it say? Ion's voice broke. It's for me? Zane leaned in. Read it. Ion nodded, struggling to hold himself together, and began. Ion, if you are reading this, it means I never found the courage to say this in person. His hands shook, but he continued. You became the man I hoped I could be. Strong, patient, and kind, even when life wasn't fair to you. Mira wiped her tears again. Zane stayed silent, listening carefully. I saw your struggles, every single one, and I am sorry I didn't stand beside you the way you deserved. Ion paused. He couldn't go on for a moment. The words were too heavy, too real, but then he took a deep breath and finished reading the line that changed everything. Everything I built here was for you three, not as an apology, but as proof that I never stopped loving you. Mira broke down completely. Zane hugged her tightly. Ion lowered the letter slowly. His entire understanding of their grandfather had changed in just a few moments, but something still didn't make sense. Mira looked up. What did he build? Zane wiped his eyes. Yeah, what does that mean? Ion looked around the garage again, this time not as a place of mystery, but as a place of purpose. The tools, the notebooks, the motorcycle, the boxes, it all meant something. It all connected. He stepped back slowly, taking it all in. Then he noticed something on the far wall, covered by a large sheet, different from everything else, bigger, more important. Ion pointed at it. I think it's that. Mira stood up, her heart pounding. Zane followed closely behind. They walked toward it together, slowly, almost afraid of what they might find. Ion reached for the sheet. His hand paused for a second. Then he pulled it down, and what stood behind it made all three of them freeze. Their eyes widened, their breath caught, and within seconds, tears filled their eyes again, because what their grandfather had built was something they never expected, something deeply personal, something that explained everything. Mira whispered through her tears. He was doing this for us? Ion couldn't speak. Zane held his hand tightly, and for the first time since entering the garage, they understood. But the truth behind it was even bigger than they imagined. The sheet fell to the ground. Dust swirled in the air, but none of them moved. None of them spoke, because standing in front of them was not just an object. It was something far more powerful. It was a wall, a massive wooden wall, covered entirely with photographs. Hundreds of them. Mira took a slow step forward. Her hands trembled. No way. Zane's eyes widened. Is that us? Ion moved closer too, and then it hit him. Every single photo was a moment from their lives, moments they didn't even know had been captured. Mira reached out and touched one. It was her first day of school. She remembered that dress, that nervous smile, but she never remembered their grandfather being there. How did he take this? She whispered. Zane pointed to another. That's my birthday. He laughed softly through tears. I thought he forgot that day. Ion scanned the wall. His heartbeat grew faster, because the photos weren't random. They were arranged, carefully, chronologically, from their childhood, all the way to now. Every year, every phase, every change. Their grandfather had been there, watching, recording, remembering, even when they thought he wasn't. Mira wiped her tears. This whole time we thought he didn't care. Ion shook his head slowly. No, he cared more than we ever knew. Zane stepped back, looking at the entire wall. It's like he built our lives here. And that's when Ion noticed something else. At the center of the wall, there was an empty space, perfectly shaped, like something was meant to be placed there. Mira noticed it too. Why is that part empty? Zane tilted his head. Maybe something is missing? Ion's eyes moved around the garage, thinking, searching. Then he remembered something. The letter. He quickly unfolded it again, scanning the lines. There, at the bottom, a final sentence. One he hadn't read out loud before. His voice came out barely above a whisper. The last piece is not something I could create alone. Mira looked confused. What does that mean? Zane asked, what last piece? Ion looked at both of them, then back at the empty space. I think it's us. Silence, deep and overwhelming. Mira shook her head slowly. No, there's more. She pointed to the bottom of the wall. There was a small shelf, and on it, a camera. Old, but well kept. Zane picked it up carefully. It still works. Ion took it from him, turned it on, and to their surprise, it powered up. The screen flickered, then displayed something unexpected. A video file. One single file. Dated just days before their grandfather passed away. Myra's breath caught. He recorded something. Zane stepped closer. Play it. Ion hesitated. His thumb hovered over the button. Then he pressed it. The screen went black for a second. Then slowly, their grandfather appeared, sitting right here, in this very garage. The same wall behind him, but incomplete, just like they were seeing now. He looked older, weaker, but his eyes, they were full of warmth, full of emotion. He smiled gently. Hello. His voice was soft, but clear. Mira covered her mouth again. Zane held onto her arm. Ion stood frozen. I don't know if you'll ever watch this, their grandfather continued. But if you are, then you've opened garage. He chuckled lightly. I always wondered who would be brave enough first. Tears rolled down Myra's face. Zane whispered, I miss him. The video continued. I know I wasn't the easiest person to understand. His expression turned serious. I made distance where I should have made memories. Ion clenched his jaw, listening closely. But that doesn't mean I wasn't there. He gestured behind him. To me, this was my way of being close to you. The camera shifted slightly, showing glimpses of the photo wall, still unfinished. I watched you grow, he said. Every laugh, every tear, every moment you thought I wasn't paying attention. A small pause. Then, Mira broke down again. Zane hugged her tighter. Ion's eyes never left the screen. I wanted to give you something, their grandfather continued. Something that would remind you that you were never alone. He looked directly into the camera now, like he was looking straight at them. And that's why I built this. His voice softened. This is not just a wall of memories. It's a story. Your story. Another pause. Then he smiled again. But it's not finished. Ion's heart skipped a beat. Mira whispered, the empty space. Their grandfather nodded slightly. As you can see, there's one part missing. Zane leaned closer, almost as if he could step into the screen. I couldn't complete it, he said, because the final memory has to be created together. Ion's eyes filled again. What does he mean? The answer came instantly from the screen. I want you to take one photo. All of you, right here, in front of this wall. Mira gasped. Zane smiled through tears. Ion couldn't move. And placed in the center, their grandfather finished, not as the end of the story, but as the beginning of a new one. Silence followed. Then one final line, the one that broke them completely. I may not be there with you, but if you're standing together, he paused, his voice almost a whisper now. Then I never really left. The video ended. The screen went dark, and for a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Only quiet sobs filled the garage. Mira dropped to her knees, crying openly. Zane sat beside her, holding her tightly. Ion stood still, the camera still in his hands. But now everything made sense. The distance, the silence, the mystery. It wasn't absence. It was love, expressed in the only way their grandfather knew how. Ion wiped his tears slowly, then looked at them. We have to do it. Mira looked up. What? The photo. Zane nodded immediately. Yes. Mira stood up, still emotional, still shaken, but now smiling through tears. Ion set the camera down carefully, positioned it in front of the wall, then joined them. The three of them stood together, in front of a lifetime of memories. Ion set the timer, then quickly stepped into place. Mira held Zane's hand. Zane leaned into Ion, and for the first time in a long time, they felt complete. The camera clicked. A single moment captured, but this time they knew it mattered. Ion walked over, picked up the camera, looked at the photo, and smiled. "It's perfect." Mira nodded. Zane wiped his face. "Let's put it up." They printed it later that evening, carefully, respectfully, and returned to the garage. Ion placed it in the center, right where it belonged, and as they stepped back, looking at the finished wall, tears filled their eyes once again. But this time, they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of understanding, of connection, of love. Mira whispered softly, "We were never forgotten." Ion nodded, not even for a second. Zane smiled. He was always with us. And in that moment, the garage was no longer abandoned. It was alive, filled with memories, with meaning, with a love that had finally been seen. The photo was finally in place, right at the center of the wall, perfectly aligned, perfectly meaningful. The three of them stood in silence, just looking at it, taking everything in. For a moment, it felt complete, like the story had reached its end. Mira let out a soft breath. "It's done." Zane nodded. "Yeah, it feels different now." Ion didn't respond, because something inside him said this wasn't the end. Not yet. He looked around the garage again, this time with new eyes, not searching for answers, but sensing something unfinished, something still waiting. "Do you feel that?" he asked quietly. Mira frowned. "Feel what?" Ion stepped closer to the wall again. "There's more." Zane tilted his head. "More what?" Ion pointed at the frame, holding their new photo. "Look at this." Mira leaned in. "It's just a frame." But Ion shook his head. "No, it's different." He gently lifted it and noticed something strange. The frame was heavier than it should be. Myra's heart started racing again. "Why is it so heavy?" Zane stepped closer. "Is there something inside?" Ion carefully turned it around. There, on the back, a small latch, almost invisible, hidden in plain sight. Mira gasped, "No way." Ion hesitated for a second, then slowly opened it. A soft click echoed in the garage, and the back panel came loose. Inside was another envelope, sealed, with 3 names written on it. Ion, Mira, Zane. Zane whispered he knew. Myra's hands trembled again. This was planned. Ion took a deep breath, then opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded document, thicker than a letter, official, carefully prepared. Ion unfolded it. His eyes scanned the page, and instantly his expression changed. Mira noticed. "What is it?" Ion didn't speak right away. He read again, just to be sure. Zane tugged his sleeve. "Say something." Ion finally looked up, his voice low, shocked. "It's the deed." Mira blinked. "A what?" "A property deed." Zane looked confused. "For what?" Ion swallowed. "For this place." Silence. Mira shook her head slowly. "No, the house belongs to Dad." Ion nodded. "The house, yes." He pointed around. "But not this." Zane's eyes widened. "You mean the garage?" Ion nodded again. "It's legally separated." Mira stepped back, trying to process it. Why would he do that? Ion flipped to the next page. There was more, much more, and then he read the line that changed everything again. "This space, along with everything inside it, now belongs equally to my grandchildren." Zane gasped. "All of us?" Ion nodded. Mira covered her mouth. "But why?" Ion kept reading, his voice steadier now, like he was uncovering something bigger. "This is not just a garage. It is a beginning. I built this place not only to remember the past, but to shape your future." Zane whispered, Our future? Mira looked around again. The tools, the workbench, the motorcycle, the wall. It suddenly felt different. Not like a memory, but like a purpose. Ion turned the page. There was a handwritten note attached, this time shorter, but more direct. Each of you has something special, something you haven't fully seen yet. This place was built so you could discover it together. Myra's voice shook. He believed in us. Zane nodded slowly, even when we didn't. Ion read the final lines, and this time he smiled through tears. If you're standing here now, it means you chose to open the door. That choice matters, because what comes next is up to you. A long silence followed, not heavy this time, but thoughtful. Mira sat down again, looking at her hands. What are we supposed to do with this? Zane looked at the motorcycle. Maybe fix things? Ion shook his head slightly. No, it's more than that. He walked to the workbench, ran his fingers across it. This place isn't just for building objects. He looked back at them. It's for building something bigger. Mira looked up. Like what? Ion paused, thinking, then said softly, something he couldn't finish himself. Zane's eyes lit up. Like, continuing his story? Ion smiled. Exactly. Mira stood up slowly, a new kind of emotion in her eyes. Not just sadness, not just relief, but determination. He gave us everything we need, she said. Zane nodded and trusted us with it. Ion looked around one last time. The garage no longer felt like a mystery, or even just a memory. It felt like an opportunity. But then, Zane noticed something else. Wait! Ion turned. What? Zane pointed at the motorcycle again. There's something on it. Mira walked closer. There wasn't anything there before. Ion frowned. That's not possible. But as they approached, they saw it clearly. Attached near the seat, a small metal plate, engraved, fresh, untouched by dust. Mira read out loud, her voice barely above a whisper. Start where he stopped. Zane looked confused. What does that mean? Ion stared at the motorcycle, then at the tools, then at the wall, and suddenly it all connected. His eyes widened slightly. I know. Mira turned to him. Know what? Ion took a deep breath. This wasn't just about memories. He looked at them both. This was about giving us direction. Zane asked, direction to what? Ion smiled faintly. To something we haven't even imagined yet. Myra's heart started racing again, not from fear this time, but from possibility. But how do we even begin? She asked. Ion looked at the words again. Start where he stopped. Then he said, we figure out what he was trying to build next. Zane grinned. Like a mission? Ion nodded. Exactly like that. Mira took one last look at the wall, at the photo they just added, at the story they had just completed. And then she turned back. Ready? Then let's not stop here. Because now, this wasn't just about their grandfather anymore. It was about them, their choices, their future, and the path he had quietly prepared for them. Ion picked up the notebook again, this time not to look back, but to move forward. And as the three of them stood together, in the middle of that once-forgotten garage, they realized something powerful. The greatest thing their grandfather left behind wasn't just memories. It was purpose. The words start where he stopped didn't leave Ion's mind. They echoed in every corner of the garage, like a quiet instruction that refused to fade. Mira stood near the wall again, staring at the center photo they had just placed. It feels like he's still talking to us, she whispered. Zane nodded slowly, like we're supposed to do something now. Ion didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the workbench, this time not just observing, but searching with intention. Every drawer, every tool, every corner. Then he stopped. His fingers paused on something unusual, a thin metal panel beneath the workbench, different from everything else. Too clean, too precise. Help me with this, he said. Mira and Zane rushed over. Together, they pulled the panel open, and beneath it was a set of blueprints, carefully rolled, preserved, waiting. Myra's eyes widened. No way. Zane grabbed one carefully, unrolling it slowly. Lines, measurements, designs. Complex but purposeful. What is this? He asked. Ion leaned closer, and then he saw it. A structure. Not a house, not a machine, but something in between. A space, a workshop, a learning center, a place designed for building, creating, and teaching. Mira read the title at the top. Her voice trembled. The Legacy Workshop Project. Silence filled the garage. Ion stepped back slowly. This is what he was building. Zane frowned. But why us? Ion picked up another page and read softly. I wanted to build a place where my grandchildren would never feel lost the way I did. Mira sat down on a nearby stool. Listening, Ion continued. A place where they can create, learn, fail, and try again. A place that turns pain into purpose. Zane looked at the blueprint again. It's not just a building. Ion nodded. It's a future, Mira whispered. He wanted us to continue it. Ion turned another page. There was a final note. Short, simple, but heavy. If you've reached this point, then I trust you more than I trusted myself. Mira wiped her tears again. Zane smiled faintly. He really believed in us. Ion exhaled deeply. For the first time since entering the garage, he felt clarity, not confusion, not grief, but direction. He looked at them both. So, what do we do? Mira stood up immediately. We finish it. Zane nodded. Yes. Ion looked at the garage one last time, at the wall of memories, at the motorcycle, at the tools, at everything their grandfather had left behind. And then he said something that changed everything. We don't just finish it. He paused. We build it better. Mira smiled through tears. Zane stepped forward. Together? Ion nodded. Together? That word felt different now. Stronger. Permanent. Not just family, but team. The next few days passed differently. The garage was no longer silent. It became alive again. Plans were discussed. Ideas were drawn. Old tools were repaired. New ones were organized. Every corner of the garage started changing, not into something new, but into something meaningful, a space with purpose. Neighbors started noticing, curious, confused. Some even stopped to ask, "What are you building?" Ion always answered the same way, "Something my grandfather started." And that was enough, because people could feel it. This wasn't just construction. It was continuation. One evening, as the sun set through the open garage door, Mira stood beside Ion. "I used to think he didn't care," she said softly. Ion shook his head. He cared more than we understood. Zane joined them, holding a set of tools. "Then let's make sure no one else ever misunderstands him again." Ion smiled. "Exactly." Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the garage transformed. What was once forgotten became something alive, a foundation, a beginning, a promise kept. And one morning, as they stood in front of the nearly completed project, Mira looked at the sign above it, the Legacy Workshop. She smiled. He'd be proud. Zane nodded. He already is. Ion placed a final photo from the garage wall into a frame near the entrance. The same one. The last piece. He stepped back, looking at everything they had built, and for the first time, he didn't feel like they had lost their grandfather. He felt like they had finally understood him, not as a distant memory, but as a guiding force. Ion whispered softly, "Thank you," not to the empty space, but to everything he left behind, because in the end, their grandfather didn't just leave them a garage. He left them a purpose, a future, and a reason to build something that would outlive them all. The camera they once found sat at the entrance table, still working, still ready, and as the three grandchildren stood together one final time, Zane pressed record and smiled. "Let's continue the story." The red light turned on, and the Legacy moved forward